React Native now supports performance. So go ahead, pull in our SDK, just specify the performance config, which I'll go over shortly, and transactions will be shot up. In addition to telling you what's broken, are folks adopting your release properly? We're going to be able to tell you the slow transactions, the failing transactions, and link this all together. So let's go through this just like we did for Flutter. So I'm going to go back to the documentation here. I'm going to go to React Native. And let's go over what the features are real quick. So obviously we got error tracking, the offline storage, context is going to be surface as such, breadcrumbs, auto linking, right? So we don't have to manually link as part of the setup process, release health, performance monitoring, which we'll get into in just a bit. And our React Native SDK is a superset of actually a lot of SDKs. It's their JavaScript SDK, our Android SDK, our iOS SDK, and anything underneath that as well. We're going to symbolicate as necessary, and we support Hermes, Expo, and the RAM bundles as well. So let's get set up real quick. And once again, side by side, I'm going to showcase my code, and then we'll take you through this. So first, we're just going to get set up with the SDK in regards to errors and releases, and then integrate performance and talk about what we're seeing and what's happening under the hood here. So here we have the documentation on the left and the code on the right. I've already installed the package. So if I go into package.json, we can see right here that I've installed the relevant packages, and we got to include Sentry React Native as Sentry tracing. And then next, since I'm using one of the more recent versions of React Native, we can go run the wizard, which will do a number of things. So one, it'll instrument Android accordingly. It'll instrument Cocoa accordingly. It'll add the build steps for Android and iOS so that the symbols are shot up, and that's going to be done via our Gradle plugin via Android, and it's going to be done via hooking into the build phases and using the Sentry CLI tool to upload. And this is all going to happen under the hood to get those symbols to us. So let's go ahead and run the wizard real quick. And what's going to happen is it's going to pull up a browser, and it's going to take me to it's going to pull in my settings here. And I'll get to choose my project and the type, and it'll instrument accordingly. And while that's happening, I'm going to keep going through the documentation here. And in terms of instrumentation, in our app.js, we're going to do sentry.init and then the DSN. So let's go, oh, here we go, the selector. So here, choose this one, and there we go. And then in my app, I have sentry.init, the DSN, and this is all that's required for error monitoring. And I also want to get set up with release health. So I'm going to go into here, go over here. I'm going to specify the release version. And in addition to that, we want to specify this right here so that sessions are set to Sentry. And that's what we have right here. And now at this point, we're set up with errors and sessions. So if we go to Sentry, and let's go to my project. At this point, we're going to have the session information here and the errors as such. Next, we want to get the new offering in place, and this is the performance piece. So let's go ahead and check out the documentation and go from there. If I go to performance monitoring and then go to setup, gives me the instructions right here. So it's just integrations, new Sentry native tracing, and then the tracing origins, which is basically which transactions I want to have Sentry tracked. So here in my case, I want anything that's going out to HTTPS to be tracked so that I know if those are causing slowdowns to my customer experience. And then we have traces sample right here, just to make sure how many transactions we want sent up. For demo purposes, I'm using 100%, but you can sample this down as necessary. And then to do dynamic sampling within the SDK, you can use traces sampler and operate on that data accordingly to sample so that you can sample different things at different rates and accordingly. So I have this all set up. The other thing with, oh yeah, with actually Flutter as well that I forgot to mention, and React Native, which I did mention, is that the symbols are being sent up and that's all taken care of. In Flutter, I used the Sentry CLI to shoot up the symbols as such. But we are set up here for errors and release health. And now we are set up for performance here as well by integrations and use the Sentry React Native tracing. And we're specifying which things we want to trace. And additionally, we see here the routing instrumentation. I'm going to cover that shortly in just one moment because that is part of our included instrumentation. So by default, we are going to create a child span for any XHR or fetch. And we are also going to track the routing instrumentation. So I'm going to go ahead, scroll down into here. And this is what we're doing here via routing instrumentation. Since I'm using React Navigation v5, I'm going to go ahead and follow those instructions. But basically, we support v5 and v4, and we'll have more support in the future. And if you don't, go ahead and use our custom instrumentation and go ahead and track. But here, if we go ahead and view this, what we want to do here is create this routing instrumentation and specify it as part of our integrations. And then on anything that we want to track, so this will automatically track navigations and create transactions accordingly. But we're going to want to track more stuff as well, right? We're going to want to know React components when they're mounting, when they're rendering, and such. So just with this, what we're going to see out of the box, let me go ahead and show you. So if I go ahead to performance and go ahead to my React Native project here, I can see my home transaction here, and it'll just be the navigations and the XHRs that happen. I jammed a button to basically create a bunch of XHRs, but we can see exactly what's going on there. We want to see much more than that, right? We want to see what's happening in React land and what's going on there. So that's why we're going to do a little bit of more instrumentation here. So if we go down to the bottom here, we can hook in the React profiler here. So when we are exporting our components, we just want to wrap it with Sentry.WithProfiler, and we're going to be good here. So let me go ahead and show you what I've done in this case. So my app here is this guy right over here. And what I want to do is be able to go ahead and generate a transaction for all of this information and understand what's going on. So this is a new navigation screen that popped up. I'm hitting an API, which is rendering this information. So there's some React activity happening. So if I go ahead to my code here, I go to tool store, or sorry, tracker stream. What we see here is that we've specified Sentry.WithProfiler on the tracker screen, and we've also done it with the subcomponents as well. So now let's take a look at what we see here. So if we go ahead to performance, we have our tracker screen here. Let me just go ahead to the last 24 hours. And now here we have a bunch of these transactions. And we can see the navigation where we got it onto the tracker. You can see the React mount. We can see the XHR and all the mounts and renders of any of those components that we've instrumented with that profiling. So now this is a lot of useful information, right? I'm seeing that 59% of my time is being spent on XHRs and fetches or in HTTP land. About 40% is being spent within renders, and the mounting is very little here. But this is giving me an understanding of exactly what's happening in my app. Now, if we're also using Sentry on the backend, we can go ahead and click into here, and it would say view span and go into there. So that's really going to allow you to understand whether the slowdown is on the front end or back end and be able to trace that end to end. So in summary here, we've been all wired up with performance on React Native. And now we can all see this within one screen on the release health page, where we see the related errors, any of the frequent transactions or failing transactions or slow transactions, and we can go ahead and dive in from there, going into the appropriate data set, understanding what's broken and what's slow, and how my release is behaving in React Native. And I have one more thing to show you outside of React Native. But before I do that, there's a really good blog post that one of our developers wrote about how they've used performance monitoring as well. So here it goes through the instrumentation, it goes through how to instrument promises, and it shows a bunch of other custom instrumentation and using the transaction hub to make sure that that we can get all of our transactions surfaced and that we're passing around the appropriate information and retrieving the appropriate information when necessary.